I never thought I'd be telling this story, not here, not like this. But sometimes the truth spills out whether you want it to or not. And tonight, as I sit here with the echo of gunfire still burning in my ears, I can't help but replay the moments that led us to this. My sister, my sweet, innocent sister, was lying in her white wedding dress, bleeding into the grass, while the sound of violin music hung frozen in the air. And the woman holding the smoking gun. Our neighbor, the one we all called Karen, the same woman who had been at war with our family for years. The sight of her face, twisted in a mix of rage and triumph, is seared into my mind. The guests screamed. Chairs toppled over. The wedding cake, untouched, sat in the sun like some cruel symbol of everything that was supposed to be perfect. My hands shook as I rushed to my sister's side, the lace of her gown sticking to the blood that spread too fast, too bright. She looked up at me with wide, shocked eyes. And in that moment, as I pressed my hands against her wound, I made a decision that would change everything. But to understand how we got here, I need to take you back. Because on the surface, our family was the kind that people envied. My father was the picture of stern authority, my mother the nurturing host who never let anyone leave the house hungry, and my sister, the bride, was always the golden child. The light, the one who made everyone smile. I was her older brother, quieter, more serious, the one who watched instead of basked. To the outside world, we were perfect. Sunday dinners, family trips, holiday cards where everyone matched in coordinated sweaters. But behind that picture, behind those carefully arranged smiles, were cracks. Cracks we ignored because admitting them would mean tearing apart the image we'd built. And Karen, our neighbor, our tormentor, saw every single crack and made it her mission to wedge herself into them. I still remember the first time she knocked on our door. I must have been 12, my sister 9. Karen stood there in her pressed blouse and pearls, a clipboard tucked under her arm like it was some kind of weapon. She smiled, but it was the kind of smile that didn't reach her eyes. She introduced herself as the president of the HOA, rattling off rules like she was reading scripture. Lawn height, mailbox paint, trash day etiquette. My father nodded politely, my mother thanked her, and I watched the way Karen's eyes scanned our yard like a hawk searching for prey. It didn't take long before the complaints started. A flower planted too close to the sidewalk. A bicycle left leaning against the garage. Even the sound of us laughing too loud in the backyard was enough to earn us one of her neatly typed letters. And every time my parents complied. They trimmed, they painted, they hushed, because keeping peace was easier than fighting. My sister and I whispered about it at night, making up nicknames for her, mocking her voice. But even then, I felt the tension settle into our bones. As we grew older, the tension grew sharper. Karen wasn't just a neighbor, she was a shadow looming over every decision. My sister, ever the people-pleaser, tried to charm her, baking cookies, offering smiles. Karen would accept them with pursed lips, only to file another complaint the next day. For me, I kept my distance, watching, waiting, storing up every memory like ammunition I hoped I'd never need. And yet, despite all that, life carried on. My sister found love. She met a man who adored her, who looked at her like she was the sun itself. Their relationship was like something out of a movie, romantic dates, laughter that filled rooms, plans that seemed unshakable. When he proposed in the middle of a garden lit with fairy lights, our family wept tears of joy. For a moment, we thought maybe, just maybe, the cracks didn't matter. Maybe love was strong enough to patch them over. The wedding was planned meticulously. My mother poured her soul into it, my father spared no expense, and my sister, she glowed. Every detail mattered. The delicate lace of her gown, the soft blush roses, the string quartet that would play as she walked down the aisle. We rented the ranch-style venue near our home, the one with rolling fields and a lake that reflected the sky like a mirror. It was supposed to be perfect. Except perfection has a way of inviting ruin, and ruin came in the form of Karen. We had tried, believe me, we had tried to keep her out of it. The venue wasn't even under the HOA's jurisdiction, but somehow she found her way there. She showed up in a pale blue dress, clutching a gift bag that looked more like a prop than a present. My mother, ever the peacemaker, whispered that it was better to let her stay than cause a scene. My father's jaw tightened, but he agreed. My sister, too radiant to let anything dim her day, simply smiled and said, "It's fine." But it wasn't fine. I knew it the moment I saw the way Karen's eyes flicked over the guests, the way she positioned herself near the aisle, as if claiming territory. I felt it in the way her smile curled at the edges when the music started, when my sister stepped out, a vision in white. There was something hungry in her expression, something waiting. The ceremony began, vows spoken under the weight of everyone's gaze. My sister's voice trembled with joy as she promised forever. Her husband's words were steady, reverent, filled with devotion. And then, a sound cut through it all. A sound that didn't belong. The sharp crack of a gunshot. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Birds startled into the air. The quartet froze mid-note. My sister staggered, her bouquet slipping from her hands as red bloomed against her gown. I can still hear the screams, my mother's voice tearing through the silence, my father's roar of disbelief, my own legs moving before I realized it, closing the space between us as she collapsed. And standing there, the gun still raised, was Karen. Her eyes met mine, cold, triumphant, unapologetic. I dropped to my knees beside my sister, my hands pressing desperately against her wound, the warm, slick blood soaking into my palms. Her lips trembled as she whispered my name. And in that moment, as the chaos erupted around us, as guests ran and someone shouted to call 911, I realized something. Karen had no idea who I really was. No one did. And that ignorance, her ignorance, was going to cost her everything. People always assume disasters happen suddenly. A lightning strike, an accident, a single moment that rips life apart. But the truth? They build, slowly, layer by layer, like a crack in glass spreading quietly until the whole thing shatters. That gunshot at my sister's wedding, it wasn't sudden. It was the climax of years of small wounds, of favoritism, secrets, and choices no one wanted to admit they made. My sister and I grew up in a house where roles were silently assigned. She was the golden one, the light. I was the shadow. I never minded at first. She was younger, and it felt natural to protect her, to watch her bask while I stood guard in the background. She could charm a room without trying, her laughter, her way of leaning in when people spoke, making them feel like the center of the universe. My parents adored her. Teachers praised her. Even strangers smiled at her. And me, I was the serious one, the quiet achiever, the one expected to be strong, steady, invisible until needed. At family dinners, compliments flowed toward her. "What a beautiful drawing, sweetheart. You're so talented. Your smile lights up the room." My report cards, perfect as they were, barely earned a nod. I don't say this with bitterness, at least not then. I loved her. I wanted her to shine. But it created a pattern one Karen noticed the second she entered our lives. Karen fed on imbalance. She could smell it like blood in the water, and she made sure to use it. I'll never forget the summer I was 16. My sister was 13 in braces, still all elbows and knees. Karen had called another urgent HOA meeting, this time over the color of our shutters. She said they were too bold, too non-compliant with neighborhood aesthetics. My father, worn from work, finally snapped and argued back. My mother stood between them, smoothing things over, apologizing for a rule we never even knew existed. But Karen didn't let it go. That night, as I sat on the porch, Karen walked by with her little clipboard. She stopped, her eyes narrowing at me. "You know," she said, "your sister's got such potential. She's going to go far. Pretty girls always do." The way she said it, it wasn't a compliment. It was a knife wrapped in sugar. She leaned closer, lowering her voice. "But you'll always be the one holding her coat, won't you?" I remember my hands tightening into fists. My heart pounded so hard I thought it might break my ribs. She smiled, satisfied with the reaction, and walked away. It was the first time I understood she wasn't just a bitter neighbor. She wanted to divide us, to use those tiny cracks in our family until they split wide open. And my parents, blinded by their desire to keep peace and protect the golden image, never saw it. But I did. Flash forward a few years and my sister was in college. She blossomed into everything people expected her to be: brilliant, beautiful, adored. She was the one who brought boyfriends home, who got engagement rings whispered about, who had professors writing glowing letters. And I was in law school, grinding, sleepless, carrying a weight no one else seemed to notice. Every holiday, Karen would appear like clockwork. If my sister's car was parked slightly too close to the curb, she left notes. If our holiday decorations didn't meet her standards, she filed complaints. And every time she found a way to needle me. "Still studying? Poor thing, your sister already has so much to celebrate." Or worse, "You're smart, yes, but people remember beauty, and she has that." It wasn't just Karen, though. It was the way my parents reinforced it without meaning to. My mother once whispered to me, "You know, darling, your sister needs you to always look out for her. You're strong, she's delicate." And my father, on the day she got engaged, raised a toast that started with, "She's always been the heart of this family." I clapped and smiled, but something sharp twisted inside me. And that's when the secrets began. I discovered things no one knew I knew. My sister, for all her perfection, wasn't flawless. She had doubts, fears, moments of recklessness. She called me late one night, crying, confessing she wasn't sure about marrying her fiancé, that she felt suffocated by everyone's expectations. She begged me not to tell our parents. I held her secret, locked it away because I loved her. But Karen, she somehow sensed the vulnerability. She began showing up more often, cornering my sister in the driveway, pretending concern. "Marriage is hard," I overheard her say once. "Pretty girls like you need to be careful, men always stray." I saw the way my sister flinched, the way she later brushed it off as nothing. But I knew Karen was weaving her poison again. And then came the rehearsal dinner. The night before the wedding, the air was thick with celebration. Family filled the room, laughter bounced off the walls, glasses clinked. My sister was radiant, her fiancé beaming beside her. And yet Karen somehow slithered in. She wasn't invited, of course not, but she arrived claiming she was dropping off a gift. My father, unwilling to cause a scene, let her in. She lingered too long, her eyes scanning everything like a vulture circling a feast. At one point, I found her standing alone by the window, looking out at the yard where the wedding would be held. She didn't smile. She didn't speak. She just stared as if she already knew what she was going to do. Later that night, when most guests had gone, my sister pulled me aside. Her hands trembled as she held mine. "Promise me," she whispered. "Promise me tomorrow will be perfect. No matter what happens, don't let anything ruin it." Her eyes searched mine, desperate, fragile. And I promised. I promised with every ounce of my being. But even then, I felt a weight in my chest. Because promises don't stop bullets, promises can't rewrite the past. And maybe, just maybe, I should have told her the truth about who I was. About the life I lived outside the family bubble. About the power I held, the robes I wore, the gavel that could crush or save lives. Because Karen didn't just underestimate me. My sister did too. And that secret, the one I carried even as I watched her walk down the aisle in her wedding gown, was the very thing that could have stopped it all. But by the time the gun went off, it was already too late. The wedding venue still felt like a dream that morning. Dew shimmered on the grass, white chairs lined up in perfect rows, and the lake beyond sparkled under the sun. Everything looked so pure, so untouched, like a fairy tale waiting to happen. But even as I stood there watching guests arrive, the knot in my stomach tightened. Maybe it was instinct. Maybe it was the years of dealing with Karen, but I knew perfection never survived long when she was around. I kept scanning the crowd, forcing myself to smile as relatives greeted me. My uncle slapped my shoulder, telling me how proud my parents must be of me. My aunt fussed with my tie, laughing about how I still looked like the serious little boy from the family photo albums. They didn't know. None of them knew who I really was now. To them, I was still just the quiet, older brother, and I liked it that way. But the truth was always humming beneath the surface. I wasn't just a brother. I wasn't just a guest. I carried a title, a responsibility that no one here could have imagined. I'd spent years in courtrooms, listening to lies unravel, watching families destroy each other with secrets, passing down judgments that carried the weight of entire lives. And yet here I was, pretending to be ordinary, pretending I didn't see the storm building in plain sight. My sister appeared from the bridal suite, glowing in her gown. For a moment the world seemed to pause. My mother's eyes brimmed with tears, my father's pride showed in the stiff set of his jaw, and the guests let out a collective gasp of awe. I caught my sister's gaze. She looked so happy, so fragile in her happiness that I wanted to wrap her in armor. And then I saw her. Karen. She sat 3 rows back on the left, legs crossed neatly, her pale blue dress too sharp against the soft tones of the wedding party. Her lips curved in that same thin smile I'd known my whole life. She looked out of place, like a wasp at a picnic. Nobody else seemed to notice, but I couldn't take my eyes off her. Every instinct screamed at me. I wanted to walk over, tell her to leave, drag her out by the wrist if I had to. But I remembered my sister's words from the night before. "Promise me tomorrow will be perfect." If I caused a scene, if I shattered the image she wanted so badly, would that be any better than Karen's poison? The ceremony began. Soft strings filled the air as my sister walked down the aisle. Her fiancé's face lit up, his eyes locked on her as if nothing else existed. Vows were exchanged, words trembling with love and devotion. For a fleeting moment, I allowed myself to believe maybe, just maybe, we would escape the curse of Karen. But when have we ever? The first interruption was small. A sharp cough from Karen, loud enough to turn heads. She smiled as if it were nothing, but I saw the flicker of annoyance in my father's eyes. Then came the second, a pointed clearing of her throat just as my sister began her vows. My mother's hand tightened around her clutch. My father shifted uncomfortably. And then, in the middle of the minister's words, Karen stood. "Excuse me," she said, her voice cutting through the air. Every head turned. I just think it's important everyone knows, she began, pausing for effect, letting the silence stretch like a blade. My chest tightened. I knew that tone. I'd heard it before in HOA meetings, and the whispered accusations she spread like wildfire. She wasn't going to leave quietly. She was going to ruin this day one way or another. But the question was, how far would she go? Would she just embarrass us with words, or was something darker waiting? I stepped forward slightly, my body on edge, every muscle tight. Karen's eyes scanned the crowd. She smiled sweetly, mockingly. It's just, some of us wonder if everything here is truly legal. This venue, these permits, the parking situation. She trailed off, her gaze landing squarely on me. Heat flared in my chest. She knew. She didn't know everything, but she sensed enough. The minister stammered, trying to regain control. My father barked for her to sit down. My mother pleaded under her breath. My sister stood frozen, clutching her bouquet like a shield. And Karen sat down again, satisfied, as if she'd planted her seed of chaos and needed only to wait for it to sprout. The ceremony struggled on, wobbling like a tightrope walker in the wind. Vows finished, rings exchanged. Applause tried to smooth over the jagged edges of tension. For a moment, it seemed like maybe we'd survived. Then came the sound. Not the gunshot, not yet, but the metallic click of something shifting in her bag. I saw her hand move, slow and deliberate. I saw the glint of metal before anyone else did. Time slowed. Her hand rose. And here's the curiosity that haunts me, the question I still ask myself every night. Why did no one else notice her until it was too late? I shouted her name. Guests turned in confusion. My sister looked at me, her smile faltering, not understanding. And then, the blast. The world fractured in an instant. Birds scattered from the trees, the smell of gunpowder seared the air, and screams ripped through the wedding like torn fabric. My sister's body jerked, her bouquet tumbling to the ground. I rushed forward, heart hammering so hard I couldn't breathe. My mother shrieked, my father roared, guests scattered like frightened animals. Karen stood there, the gun smoking in her hands, her face calm, too calm, like she'd been waiting her whole life for this moment. And in that frozen chaos, as I pressed my hands against my sister's wound and felt her blood soak through my fingers, one thought screamed louder than all the rest. Karen had no idea who she had just crossed. The sound of the gunshot didn't just echo, it split the world in half. One moment violins, vows, and sunlight, the next blood and terror. My sister crumpled into the grass, the lace of her gown spreading like shattered porcelain, now stained red. I was on my knees before my mind even caught up, my hands pressing hard against the wound in her shoulder, trying to stop the flow. My palms grew slick, warm, slippery. I shouted her name, desperate, my voice cracking like a child's. She blinked up at me, confusion clouding her eyes, her lips trembling as if she wanted to speak but couldn't find the words. The crowd erupted. Chairs clattered as guests scrambled. Some screamed, others froze, hands over their mouths. My mother's wail tore through the chaos, raw and primal. My father lunged toward Karen, his fists clenched, only to be held back by two of my uncles. Someone shouted, "Call 911!" A guest fumbled with their phone, hands shaking so badly they nearly dropped it. But Karen stood like a statue. The gun still in her hand, smoke curling up like a cruel flag of victory. Her eyes weren't wild. They weren't even panicked. They were steady, cold, almost satisfied. "Why?" I gasped at her, though I knew she wouldn't answer. She tilted her head slightly, lips curling into a smile. "Because some things," she said, her voice calm and sharp as glass, "don't belong here." I wanted to leap at her, rip the weapon from her hand, but my sister's shallow breaths anchored me. I pressed harder against her wound, whispering, "Stay with me. Please stay with me." Her blood seeped through my fingers, warm and sticky, the metallic smell filling my nose. Sirens wailed in the distance, too far, too slow. "Get towels," I barked, my voice cutting through the panic. My cousin ran toward the catering tent, returning with white linens that quickly turned scarlet under my grip. My mother collapsed beside me, sobbing, clutching my sister's hand. "Don't you leave me," she begged. "Don't you dare." My father broke free, storming toward Karen, but she lifted the gun again. The sight of it froze everyone. Gasps rippled through the crowd. "I wouldn't," she warned, her voice unnervingly calm. "You people never understood. Rules matter. Order matters. You can't just do whatever you want." My father's face was red, veins bulging, but he stopped. My uncles shielded the younger cousins, shepherding them behind the rows of chairs. Guests whispered prayers, some cried openly. And me, I was trembling, not from fear but from fury, a fury that went deeper than blood. Karen had no idea who she had just crossed. For years, she had treated us like subjects to her little HOA kingdom, using rules as weapons, hiding behind bylaws and ordinances. She thought she could control us, humiliate us, even destroy us. But this, shooting my sister on her wedding day. She didn't realize she had stepped out of her little playground and into my arena. Because I wasn't just her neighbor. I wasn't just the older brother who stayed quiet in the background. I was the Chief Justice of the state. The man who decided what justice looked like. The man whose gavel had sent corrupt politicians, ruthless criminals, and violent offenders to their knees. But none of that mattered if my sister died in front of me. Her breathing was shallow, ragged. I pressed harder, my voice breaking. Stay awake, look at me." She blinked, her eyes fluttering. My mother stroked her hair, whispering prayers. The sirens grew louder. Hope and dread tangled in my chest. Karen lowered the gun, sliding it back into her bag with eerie calm. She smoothed her dress as if nothing had happened, as if this were just another HOA complaint. Her voice carried over the stunned crowd. "This neighborhood, this family, you've broken every rule there is. Someone had to stop you." "Stop us," I snarled, my voice shaking with rage. "You nearly killed her." Her gaze flicked to me, sharp and knowing. "And you think you're better than the rules too, don't you? I've seen the way you look at me, the way you watch." I wanted to tell her exactly who I was, to throw the weight of my title in her face. But my sister's bloodied hand grabbed mine weakly, pulling me back. Her lips parted, a whisper escaping. "Don't leave me." And that broke me. The paramedics finally arrived, rushing in with stretchers and medical bags. They pushed me aside gently, assessing her wound, barking instructions. "Pulse weak. Entry wound right shoulder. Possible internal bleeding. Let's move." I stumbled back, my hands shaking, stained crimson. My mother clung to me, sobbing uncontrollably. My father raged at the officers who arrived next, pointing at Karen. "Arrest her! She shot my daughter." The officers moved cautiously toward her. She didn't resist. She simply held out her wrists, smiling faintly as though she'd already won. They cuffed her, read her rights, and led her past the horrified guests. She caught my eye as she passed, her voice a whisper only I could hear. "This isn't over." I froze, my blood boiling. Not over. She destroyed my sister's wedding, nearly taken her life, shattered my family in one stroke, and she thought it wasn't over. The ambulance doors slammed shut, carrying my sister away. I climbed in beside her, clutching her hand, my jaw set. My parents followed in another car, guests left behind in shock, the ceremony abandoned like a battlefield. The sirens wailed as we sped toward the hospital. I stared at my sister's pale face, her breath shallow under the oxygen mask, her blood still staining my skin. And in that moment, one truth burned brighter than anything else. Karen had no idea she hadn't just shot a bride. She had declared war on me. And I was going to make sure she paid in ways she couldn't even imagine. The hospital smelled of antiseptic and fear, the kind of sterile air that clings to your throat, mixing with the faint scent of latex gloves and disinfectant wipes. I paced the cold hallway, my shoes squeaking against the polished linoleum. Every tick of the clock above me felt like a hammer to my skull. My sister was behind those doors, under bright surgical lights, while strangers cut into her to pull out a bullet that never should have pierced her flesh. Mom sat hunched in a plastic chair, rocking back and forth, whispering prayers that dissolved into sobs. Dad stood by the window, his hand pressed against the glass as though he could reach into another world where none of this had happened. My aunt clutched her rosary beads so tightly the cross left imprints in her palm. We were a family of nerves and shadows, waiting for someone to tell us whether we'd ever see my sister smile again. The double doors finally opened with a metallic groan. A doctor in green scrubs stepped out, mask pulled down around his neck, leaving faint red lines across his cheeks. His eyes were tired but steady. "She's alive," he said, and for a moment the world shifted back into color. "Alive." The word rippled through the room like a gasp of fresh air after nearly drowning. Mom collapsed into tears, clutching Dad's arm. My knees buckled, and I gripped the wall just to stay upright. But then the doctor raised a hand, his voice firm. "She's not out of danger. The bullet did significant damage. We managed to stabilize her, but there's risk of infection, and we'll need to monitor swelling near her spine. Spine, my stomach clenched. Are you saying she might not walk again? My voice cracked. The doctor's eyes softened. It's too early to say. We removed fragments, but the swelling is severe. Time will tell. Those words landed like stones in my chest. Time will tell. My sister, who danced barefoot in the rain, who twirled in her wedding dress just hours ago, now at the mercy of swelling and scar tissue. They wheeled her out moments later, her face pale beneath the oxygen mask, tubes snaking from her arms. Her hair, once glowing with bridal pins and curls, was matted with sweat. The sight shredded me. I wanted to scream, to tear the hospital apart brick by brick, to find Karen and make her feel every ounce of this agony. But then evidence began creeping in. A nurse approached me holding a small clear bag. Inside was the mangled bullet they'd removed, twisted metal stained dark with dried blood. "Chain of custody," she said, her voice brisk but professional. "Law enforcement will need this. We're logging it now." My heart hammered. The sight of that bullet, something so small, so insignificant in size, yet powerful enough to fracture an entire family's joy, brought bile to my throat. I signed the log, my hand shaking, though I didn't write my title, didn't reveal who I was. Not yet. The detective on call arrived not long after, a grizzled man with salt and pepper stubble, wearing a wrinkled suit that smelled faintly of coffee. "We've got witnesses saying it was a woman from the HOA, he said, flipping open a notepad. "Name, Karen Miller. Sound familiar?" It was like acid burning through my veins. "Familiar?" I nearly spat. "She's tormented us for years, fines, threats, harassment, you name it, and now she's escalated to attempted murder." He scribbled notes, his pen scratching like a blade across paper. "We've got units at her place now, but you should know she's already lawyering up. Claims she felt threatened and discharged in self-defense." Self-defense at a wedding. My fists curled so tightly my nails cut into my skin. The detective eyed me carefully, maybe sensing something deeper beneath my rage. "Look, we'll build the case. We've got the bullet, eyewitnesses, video from a guest's phone, but trials get messy. Be ready." Trials, if only he knew who was standing in front of him. Hours blurred into each other. Machines beeped steadily in my sister's room, their rhythm mocking the chaos outside. Every few minutes a nurse would come in, check her vitals, adjust a drip. I sat by her bed, clutching her hand. Her skin was clammy, but her fingers twitched ever so slightly against mine. I whispered into her ear, "Hold on. Don't let her win. You're stronger than her hate." At some point, Mom dozed off in the chair, Dad's head slumped forward. I stayed awake, a sentry in the dim hospital light, my mind replaying every second of the shooting. The gunshot echoing like thunder, my sister's scream, the chaos of blood staining her dress, and Karen's smug face twisted with venom. The nurse who'd logged the bullet returned. She leaned in close, her voice low. "You should know, we found gunpowder residue on her hands. Pretty clear she fired point blank." It wasn't just an accident. It wasn't a warning shot, it was intent. Malicious, cold, and deliberate. And yet, Karen was already painting herself as the victim. When the detective came back with updates, I asked him straight, "How soon before charges are filed?" He hesitated. "Depends, her attorney," pushing the fear for safety angle. "They'll try to delay, confuse, maybe even smear your family's name in the process. It'll come down to who the jury believes." The jury, my pulse quickened. For the first time, the weight of my position pressed against me. I wasn't just a brother, I was Chief Justice. And if the case went to trial in my court system, I'd be faced with a moral earthquake. Step aside, let others handle it, or step in, ensure the truth wasn't twisted. The smell of bleach from the hallway seeped into the room. My throat tightened. Justice wasn't just abstract now, it was personal. Late into the night, my sister stirred. Her eyelids fluttered, her lips moving faintly under the oxygen mask. I leaned closer, heart racing. Her voice was a rasp, barely audible. Why did she hate me so much? Tears spilled down my cheeks. I pressed my forehead to her hand. Because you shine and people like her can't stand it, but I swear to you she won't get away with this. Not ever. Her eyes flickered, then closed again, sinking back into the haze of anesthesia. But her question lingered, echoing louder than the beeping machines. Why did Karen hate her so much? Why indeed? The detective came back one last time before dawn. His jaw was tight, his eyes grim. We searched her house, found HOA paperwork stacked to the ceiling, but also something else. He slid a photo across the table. My stomach dropped. It was a printed picture of my sister, taken without her knowing, zoomed in from a distance. A stalker's photo. She was obsessed, the detective muttered. This wasn't random. The room spun. Karen wasn't just a meddling neighbor drunk on HOA power. She had crossed into obsession, into something darker. I looked back at my sister, machines keeping her tethered to life, her chest rising and falling with every mechanical sigh. And in that moment I knew this wasn't just about revenge anymore. This was about protection, about making sure Karen never had the chance to destroy another life. But to do that, I'd have to reveal the truth, who I really was. And once I did, there would be no going back. I sat in the hospital room long after dawn broke, the pale sunlight creeping across the sterile tile floor like it was afraid to touch the truth. My sister lay in her bed, motionless except for the steady rise and fall of her chest. Machines beeped and sighed like mechanical guardians. But I wasn't calm. Inside, I was at war. The detective's photo of my sister, secretly taken, lay folded in my jacket pocket. Karen hadn't just been cruel, she had been fixated, obsessed. And now the bullet, the stalking, the witnesses, all painted a picture darker than anyone wanted to admit. Still, I hadn't told the detective who I really was. Not yet. Because once I did, this case would no longer be just another investigation. It would become a storm. Mom stirred awake, her face pale from crying all night. "She'll pull through," she whispered, almost like she was trying to convince herself. "She has to." Dad rubbed his forehead. "The police will handle it. Karen will face justice." Their words were heavy, fragile with hope. But my stomach twisted, because I knew the system wasn't perfect. I had seen guilty people slip through cracks big enough to swallow entire families. And Karen, with her HOA connections, her money, her lawyers, she would try to wriggle free. And if she succeeded, my sister would carry scars, both visible and invisible, while Karen strutted free under the same sun. I couldn't allow it, but to stop it, I had to break my silence. The door creaked open. It was my cousin Daniel, his tie crooked, his face pale. He was a defense attorney, sharp, stubborn, always playing devil's advocate at family dinners. "How bad?" he asked, glancing at my sister. "Bad enough," I said, my voice flat. Daniel exhaled. "The news is already running with it. HOA chairwoman shoots bride at wedding. They're twisting it into some neighborhood feud gone wrong. If this gets spun the right way, her attorney could argue temporary panic. The jury could be swayed." Mom's hand flew to her mouth. No, they can't." "They can," Daniel said grimly. "And they will. Money talks, influence talks louder." I felt the weight in my chest grow heavier. He wasn't wrong. I'd seen it too many times, trials derailed by clever arguments, families destroyed by technicalities. Daniel looked at me, his eyes narrowing. "Unless," he paused, "unless someone with real authority steps in, someone who knows the system better than her attorneys ever could." His gaze burned into me like he already knew. My breath caught. "Daniel." "You think I don't see it?" His voice dropped low. "I've known for years you've been careful but not careful enough, Chief Justice." The words slammed into the room like thunder. Mom gasped, her hand trembling. Dad's eyes went wide, his jaw slack. For a moment, silence stretched thin, broken only by the steady beep of the heart monitor. Mom's voice was a whisper. "You, all this time." I nodded, shame and pride colliding in my chest. "I kept it quiet to protect you, to protect all of us. But right now, the only way to ensure justice is to use the power I've kept hidden." Dad shook his head slowly. "If you reveal it, the press will swarm. Karen's lawyers will cry bias. They'll accuse you of abusing your position." "They'll accuse me no matter what," I shot back. "But I won't sit here while that woman paints herself as the victim. My sister is lying in that bed because of her, and I'll make sure every piece of evidence is dragged into the light." Daniel folded his arms, watching me with something between admiration and fear. "Then you're stepping into a firestorm. Once you announce who you are, there's no turning back." "I know." The door opened again, this time the detective. He looked weary, his tie loosened, his notepad crammed with scribbles. "Update," he said. "Karen's attorney filed a motion to keep her out on bail, claims she's traumatized and needs therapy, not prison." Mom let out a strangled cry. "Therapy? She tried to kill my daughter." The detective sighed. "I don't disagree, but judges will hear her motion tomorrow morning. If she's released, she could vanish before trial. That was it. The line had been crossed. "Detective," I said, my voice calm but carrying a weight that made him stop mid-sentence. "I think it's time you knew who you're dealing with." He frowned. "What do you mean?" I stood, pulling myself taller, my words steady as stone. "I am Chief Justice." The room fell silent again. The detective blinked, then barked a short, disbelieving laugh. "Yeah, right." Daniel smirked. "He's not joking, look him up." The detective pulled out his phone, typing furiously. Then his face drained of color. He looked at me again, his voice hoarse. "My God, it's you." I nodded once. "And now that you know, here's what's going to happen. Karen doesn't get to hide behind motions or excuses. She doesn't get to smear my family's name. We'll follow due process, but every scrap of evidence, every photo, every witness statement will be preserved. No deals, no shortcuts." The detective swallowed hard. "Understood." Mom's eyes filled with tears, but this time they weren't just from fear. They were from awe, maybe even relief. Dad sank into a chair, shaking his head as though the ground beneath him had shifted. But I wasn't finished. "And detective," I added, my voice sharp as a blade, "keep her under watch. If she tries to run, I want to know before her shadow even leaves the street." "Yes, Your Honor," he murmured, the words heavy with sudden respect. After he left, the room felt smaller, charged with electricity. Mom whispered, "All this time you carried that weight alone." I nodded, "Because power is dangerous when it becomes personal. But this," I gestured at my sister, "this isn't about power, this is about survival, about truth." Daniel placed a hand on my shoulder. "Then use it, but carefully. Justice isn't just about punishment. It's about making sure the truth is undeniable." His words lingered. Justice versus vengeance, truth versus loyalty. I wanted Karen to suffer the way my sister had suffered, but I knew revenge wasn't justice. If I let anger guide me, I'd betray everything I stood for. Late that night, my sister stirred again, her eyelids fluttering open. Her voice was weak, trembling. "What happens now?" I leaned close, brushing her damp hair back. "Now we fight, but not just for you, for every person who's ever been crushed by someone like her, and I promise we won't lose." Her lips curved faintly, almost a smile, before she drifted back into sleep. I sat back, heart pounding. The choice was made. I would step into the firestorm, reveal the truth, and face the storm head-on. But I also knew, once the world learned who I was, Karen wouldn't just fight back with lawyers. She would come after me with everything she had left. And the real battle was only beginning. The courtroom buzzed with an energy that was both electric and suffocating. Reporters filled the back rows, their cameras flashing like lightning strikes every time someone important moved. The gallery was packed with neighbors, community members, even strangers who'd followed the case through the headlines. At the center of it all sat Karen Miller. Her hair, once immaculately styled, was frizzy and disheveled. Her once proud posture was slouched, but her eyes, those piercing, venomous eyes, still carried a glimmer of defiance. Even in handcuffs, she wore arrogance like a second skin. My sister sat beside me in her wheelchair. The doctors had managed to save her life, but the bullet had left scars deeper than the ones on her skin. Every movement was stiff, every wince a reminder of what had been stolen from her. Yet she insisted on being here, facing the woman who tried to destroy her life. The trial had stretched for weeks. Karen's lawyers spun stories, weaving tapestries of excuses, panic, trauma, self-defense. They tried to paint her as a victim, a woman overwhelmed by circumstances beyond her control. But every time they spoke, the evidence burned brighter. The bullet in its clear evidence bag. The photo of my sister, stalked from a distance. The eyewitness accounts from wedding guests who saw Karen raise the gun, steady, deliberate. The powder residue on her hands. And most damning of all, the shaky cell phone video. The moment frozen forever, the gunshot, the scream, the chaos. The jury watched in silence, faces pale, as the truth unfolded frame by frame. When the prosecution rested, the defense faltered. Their words grew weaker, their arguments tangled. The weight of evidence crushed them. But still, Karen smirked, as if certain that money, connections, or luck would save her one last time. On the final day, I stood, not as Chief Justice presiding over the trial, that would have been impossible, but as a brother. The court had allowed me to deliver a victim impact statement. My palms sweated, but my voice was steady as I faced the jury. My sister was supposed to begin a new chapter of her life on that day. I began, my words echoing in the quiet room. A day of joy, laughter, promises made in front of family and God. But instead, she was gunned down by someone consumed with hate, envy, and control. The bullet didn't just tear into her body, it tore into our family. It tore into trust, safety, and the very idea that a neighborhood could be a home. I turned, locking eyes with Karen. She tilted her chin, sneering. "You've heard the evidence," I continued. "You've seen the photos, the videos, the medical reports, but what you can't see is the sleepless nights. The way my sister wakes up crying from nightmares, the way my mother clutches her hand, afraid to let go, the way every celebration feels tainted with the shadow of that gunshot. This isn't just about punishment. It's about ensuring she never has the chance to do this to another family, because make no mistake, she would." The courtroom was silent. Even Karen's smirk faltered. When I sat down, my sister squeezed my hand, tears running silently down her cheeks. The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours. When they returned, their verdict was unanimous. Guilty on all counts. The words felt like thunder rolling through the room. Relief and grief collided in my chest. Mom buried her face in Dad's shoulder, sobbing. Daniel exhaled, his fists unclenching at last. Karen's face twisted, her composure shattering. She screamed at the jury, called them liars, pawns, traitors. The bailiffs restrained her as she kicked and spat, dragged from the courtroom in chains. Her shrieks echoed down the hallway, fatting into silence. Justice had spoken, but justice didn't erase scars. In the weeks that followed, life didn't magically return to normal. My sister faced grueling physical therapy. Each small victory, a finger twitch, a step with a walker, was celebrated like a miracle. But there were dark days, too. Days when pain consumed her, when anger boiled over, when she asked why she had to carry the burden of someone else's hate. I visited her daily, sitting by her side as she practiced gripping cups, as she wept in frustration. Sometimes we didn't speak at all, just sat together in silence. Because sometimes silence is the only language grief understands. The community shifted too. Neighbors who once ignored Karen's cruelty now whispered apologies, shame hanging in the air like smoke. The HOA dissolved, its power crumbling under the weight of scandal. People began planting flowers instead of complaints, speaking to each other instead of filing reports. In a strange way, Karen's destruction planted seeds of healing. As for me, I carried the weight of revelation. My family now knew who I truly was. The press swarmed for weeks, headlines screaming, "Chief Justice's sister shot by HOA chairwoman." My name, once hidden, was dragged into every conversation. Some accused me of bias, of using my power to sway justice. Others praised me for standing firm. But none of it mattered, because the truth had been undeniable, no matter who I was. One evening, months later, my sister and I sat on the porch of our parents' home. The air smelled of rain-soaked earth, crickets singing in the dark. She was stronger now, her wheelchair traded for cautious steps with a cane. She looked at me, her voice quiet. "Do you ever regret it, telling them who you are?" I thought about it, the storm it had unleashed, the headlines, the scrutiny. Then I looked at her, alive, scarred, but unbroken. "No," I said softly, "because the truth always finds its way to the light, and sometimes the only way to fight darkness is to stop hiding." She leaned her head against my shoulder, and for the first time in months, I felt peace seep into my bones. The scar would always remain, but scars are proof of survival, proof that we faced the storm and lived. And Karen, she faded into prison walls, her name becoming nothing more than a cautionary tale. A reminder that power, when twisted by hate, always devours itself. As I sit here now telling you this story, I want you to remember something. Justice isn't about titles or courtrooms. It's about choices. The choice to speak when silence feels safer. The choice to stand when fear tries to pin you down. And above all, the choice to protect the people you love, even when it means carrying scars you never asked for. So I'll leave you with this question. If you were in my place, torn between family loyalty and the truth, would you have stayed silent or stepped into the firestorm? Tell me in the comments below. And if you want more stories like this, stories of love, betrayal, and the fight for justice, make sure you subscribe. Because sometimes the only way to heal is to share the story.